And greetings. Happy Monday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on BlazeTV radio and podcast alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I'm Steve Deace. Coming up on the program today, which is brought to you by our friends over at First Cup Coffee Company. They've got a flavor for every freedom-loving American from your Patriot-owned coffee company. If you want to try it today, get 10% off when you go to firstcup.com and use the promo code DEACE. 10% off at firstcup.com, promo code DEACE. And as well, if you subscribe, you'll get an additional 10% off for the life of your subscription. That's firstcup.com, promo code DEACE. Coming up on today's program, Bob Vander Plaats will join us from the Family Leader at the bottom of this hour. On Friday evening, I went up and did a fundraiser in northwest Iowa, a few hours from here, for a very ardent pro-life state legislator, Zach Deacon. And after it was over, what I had to say, my wife was like, listen, man, I've heard you give a pro-life talk a million times, but this is one more people need to hear. And I mean, she goes, you brought some angles in that I think are important, and this needs an even bigger audience. So I am next hour, on the advice of my significant other, I am going to give you guys, I don't know that the same energy and everything will be reclamated as when you're sitting in a full room, you know, and you can look people in the eye, but in terms of the substance of what I laid out, I'm gonna do that for you guys next hour of the show. To give you a little tease. I've heard this argument my entire career since I got into this business, and it'll be 18 years in June. So about 2 weeks from today, 3 weeks from today, will be my 18th year of doing political activism full-time in various formats, broadcasting, on the ground, etc. That's been my full-time career, 18 years. And it doesn't matter if it's the Bush years, it doesn't matter. That's encompassed the last end of the Bush years, the McCain-Romney era, the Tea Party era, now the Trump-MAGA era. Every one of these eras of the Republican Party or the American right eventually comes to the conclusion, despite what data shows to the contrary, that we have to set the life issue aside so that we can win elections and solve our other issues. And I am going to show you that is exactly wrong. That is 180 degrees opposite of actually how this works. And I will walk you through why I believe this, and then you can decide whether you agree or disagree. That is coming up in the second hour of the program. But before we get there, let us begin, as we always do, with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by 11 billion people. That's approximately the number of people who attended Donald Trump's weekend rally in New Jersey. It was a jolly good time.
Silence of the Lambs. Has anyone ever seen a Silence of the Lambs? The late, great Hannibal Lecter is a wonderful man. He oftentimes would have a friend for dinner. Remember the last scene? Excuse me, I'm about to have a friend for dinner as this poor doctor walked by. I'm about to have a friend for dinner, but Hannibal Lecter, congratulations, the late, great Hannibal Lecter. We have people that are being released into our country that we don't want in our country.
Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is back with a clarification on his stance on baby killing. After telling Sage Steele last week he's A-OK with late-term baby killing. In a 7-paragraph post on X, Kennedy Jr. says he's fine with baby killing up to the point of viability and says he supports measures to reduce child murder for economic reasons. Checking in on Meet the Press, here's Lindsey Graham getting almost as excited about nuclear war as he does about eating a banana.
Why is it okay? Well, can I say this? Why is it okay for America to drop 2 nuclear bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki to end their existential threat war? Why was it okay for us to do that? I thought it was okay. To Israel, do whatever you have to do to survive as a Jewish state.
Senator, again, military officials say
whatever
the technology has changed. But let me ask you about how all
these
of this
military officials that you're talking about
let me ask you something.
Full of crap.
Learning Chinese today. Today's phrase is Lindsey Graham had blood coming out of his wherever.
林赛格雷厄姆 Lindsey Graham 的无论在哪里 都流着血。
A new poll from Signal shows that more than half of American Muslims, 57.5%, agree that Hamas was at least somewhat justified in attacking Israel, quote, as part of their struggle for a Palestinian state. That group was about as evenly divided between those who somewhat agreed at 30% and those who strongly agreed at 28%. 88% of Jewish Americans said that Hamas was not even somewhat justified. The South Carolina Senate late last week approved a ban on meatball surgery and chemical castration for minors after supporters defeated efforts to only ban treatments that would be considered irreversible. The Senate made a few changes, so it'll likely head back to the House before being made law. Target is cutting back on the number of stores that will carry Pride Month-related merchandise in June. It's a decision that comes after the retail chain last year faced a backlash over some of the products they sold. Minneapolis-based Target said in a statement that its Pride merchandise will be available next month in select stores based on historical sales performances. An unthinkable tragedy was narrowly avoided at an Abbeville, Louisiana church this weekend where a teen dressed in black and armed with a rifle was stopped by parishioners from getting inside St. Mary Magdalene Catholic Church where 60 children were making their first communion. The video shows that 48 minutes into the service, a man approaches Father Nicholas Dupre and whispers something into his ear. Father Dupre stopped what he was doing, then told everyone to sit down and started praying the Hail Mary. According to witnesses, the teen, who was dressed in black and armed with that rifle, was confronted by parishioners, escorted outside, and placed under arrest. Chief Hardy of the Abbeville Police Department said the suspect was taken into custody and questioned with his parent present. He added the suspect, a 16-year-old boy, was interviewed by officers and then taken to Abbeville General Hospital for a psych evaluation. The teen has been charged with terrorizing and 2 counts of possession of a firearm by a juvenile. A California jury has awarded $500,000 each to 2 teenagers who were kicked out of their Catholic school after it was alleged they wore blackface in a photo taken years ago, which resurfaced in 2020 amidst the George Floyd mostly peaceful protests. The jury found that the then 14-year-olds were wearing green skincare face masks in solidarity with another one of their buddies who had bad acne. The 2 teenagers will have their $70,000 tuition reimbursed as well. And finally, how each denomination handles Mother's Day. Here's Pastor Keith Foskey, Southern Baptist.
Welcome back to another interdenominational meeting. It's Mother's Day weekend, so I thought we'd all talk about what we have planned. We're going to celebrate our moms by preaching a special sermon from Proverbs 31. Well, that's great. We're doing the same sermon. Well, in our service, the text is going to be acted out by our church drama team, and the pastor's wife's going to go up on the stage and she's going to prophesy a word of knowledge over all of the women in the congregation, and then our church apostles are going to walk through the congregation and slay all the women in the spirit. Okay, sounds like our service is going to be a little bit different, but that's cool. What's everybody else got?
Presbyterian.
I wrote a poem for Mother's Day. Well, I'm so proud of you. Can we hear it? Roses are red, violets are blue. We hold to the regulative principle, so I'll be preaching Leviticus 2.
Big evangelical.
I'm so excited about Mother's Day at the Big Eva Multiplex Mega Church and Mini Mall. It is going to be lit. We're going to start the day with a waffle breakfast served by our most handsome deacons. Nobody wants an ego from an uggo. Then the ladies are going to be treated to a show of sword swallowing from a shirtless pole climbing acrobat. Are you really going to have a shirtless acrobat? Hey man, if you love Jesus, you're going to have a shirtless acrobat. What's this about a shirtless acrobat?
And that was the United Methodist. And that's what happened while we were away.
Nice. Aaron's montage brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. If you have just given up, you've decided, you know what, dealing with chronic pain will just be my lot in life from this time forward. I mean, that might be true. We do get older, right? It's not like our bodies work better at 80 than they did at 30. Okay, so, you know, that is kind of the natural way of things. But there may be some relief, if not a lot. And it might be from our friends at Relief Factor. So no guarantees. But over the years, over 1 million people have tried the 3-week quick start at Relief Factor. And at least 70% of them saw such great results in 3 weeks or less that they hung around and used the product long term. What is it? It's a drug-free supplement created by physicians who can prescribe drugs, but they were hoping to come up with something that would actually go after the inflammation causing your chronic pain and not just come up with the drugs that will mask that pain, which can have other side effects as well. And that supplement that they came up with is Relief Factor. Again, no guarantees. All right, it's not an automatic, it's not a panacea, but the odds are pretty good that your relief is just $20 away when you go to relieffactor.com. Why not just try it for 3 weeks? See if you don't see a difference in your pain level in 3 weeks or less when you go to relieffactor.com. Again, head over to relieffactor.com. All right, let's discuss a few things out of Aaron's montage. Number one, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Israel is, as a country, is a landmass about the size of, is it New Hampshire, New Jersey? I always forget. Yeah. It's one of those two.
It's one of the news.
Yeah, it's one of the news. Yeah, thank you. All right, so given that and how densely populated that area is it a good idea to drop a nuclear bomb or detonate a nuclear device literally in your neighbor's backyard? Just as a general rule, is that a good idea?
Probably not.
Probably not. Because I'm sure you can completely contain the fallout, so it will only impact Hamas ridden neighborhoods, right? You can program the fallout. Hey, only fallout only in the Hamas neighborhoods. I'm sure there will be no collateral damage whatsoever about detonating a nuclear device in your own hood. Correct?
All I know is that when they remake Doctor Strangelove, it's going to be Lindsey Graham replacing Slim Pickens on top of that missile at the end of the movie.
Well, it wouldn't be the first time that Lindsey Graham was on top of a missile, brother.
I gave that one to you for free.
Yeah, you did. Thank you very much. And
You're
don't
welcome.
think I wasn't good. I didn't see it, and I couldn't wait to swing at it, as a matter of fact. I didn't even let you finish it.
Ooh, me.
Yes. All right. And now all the guys are about to email me, can this stop? And the ladies are like, more. Like Kobe Bryant. More. All right. Let's get to a couple of other things here that I think are more serious. Never forget that worldview is destiny. We cannot escape our worldview. What we think about all day long, the way we think about it, we will eventually become. And one of the dangers you have when you are in a society that is succumbing to, if not fully in the grip of whatever the spirit of the age is of that era. Particularly if you're a wealthy, prosperous one, you start projecting that other civilizations think like you do and just are making the same assumptions that you are. That they are every bit as interested in the fallacies that you have bought into, the temptations that you are trading away your integrity for, that they're going to be thinking just like you, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't see the world for as it really is, but you see the world for what you think it ought to be, or what we used to call in our show magical thinking, kind of what we're describing here, right?
Right.
This poll of American Muslims is a great example of this. The idea that if we just gave them access to our internet porn, if they got to find out what the BMI index is with a fast food drive-through on every corner, okay, and we gave them Christmas and Easter off as paid holidays, even though they don't observe, just giving them free vacation days for things they don't even care about or observe or believe in, right? That if we gave them a touch of the things that we care about and shouldn't, and don't care about but should, if we did those things, then they would, just be like, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. No, that's American Muslims in that poll. What do you think the ones in the Middle East think? That's the ones that we have, quote unquote, Americanized. Worldview is destiny, just because the American worldview has largely collapsed. And many of our churches are full of people who profess Christ and yet have no idea, and frankly don't seem even all that interested in what that even really means. It's a social club. It's where I go to feel better. It's where I go to network. It's where I go to be told to get a Stuart Smalley sermon every weekend, or it's where I don't go at all anymore. doesn't mean that they were going to come over here and abandon all of their presuppositions of the world and their worldview at the exact same time. If anything, you know what? Let's start off optimistically on a Monday. If anything, it really does go to show how pervasive our culture of decadence and largesse and comfort and convenience, how pervasive and pervasively effective it is, that number is only 57%. I mean, I guess the good news is you got 43% of Muslims to abandon Islam.
You're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, I suppose if we just keep importing more and more of them and exporting more and more of our own beliefs, eventually, is that how this is? Does that math work? No.
I'm not going to bet on it.
No, that's not how the math works. But it does go to show 43% of them are because you have to understand Islam. Islam teaches right out of the Quran and all of its ensuing hadiths. There's not just one hadith. I know you were told that after 9/11. There's multiple hadiths, actually. Okay. And it teaches in every one of these that the Jews basically stole the birthright of Muslims. And the promise from God that went to Abraham came through Ishmael and not Isaac. So if that is the foundation of your belief, or if you didn't believe that, I guess you'd have to be a Jew, right? I mean, if you thought the other way, you'd have to be a Jew. So those are your only two options. Did it come through Ishmael or Isaac? Those are your two choices, right? So if the entire predicate, to use a phrase from when we used to have to diagram sentences back when we were kids, if the entire predicate of your argument is that the son of promise is Ishmael and not Isaac, then you would assume those who claim otherwise are either deceived, liars, or deceivers. That they know this, but they robbed you of your birthright. So you did get 43% of Muslims to say, you know what, on second thought, I'd rather see big breastises on the internet again than believe what the Quran teaches me. Progress, right? No. I'm trying here. I'm trying to start off the week on a positive note.
The flag has been planted.
Yeah, give me something. You know what? That didn't work. Let me try starting off the week on a positive note on another front. Fair? Okay. Also from your montage, Aaron. If I understand Target correctly, the company position now is that they will only sell total depravity to the markets that want that content, that want to consume total depravity. They're
just market force capitalists now.
That's where I'm going.
I have even better news than that.
Oh, tell.
Here's what's going to happen. And I hope here's what's going to happen. By this time next month, Target's going to backtrack on this backtrack. It's a 2-for-1 backtrack special at Target. Okay, but while doing the backtracking, Target is going to become the official department store of UFC, and it's going to be unpatriotic to not buy your toddler, chest binders. That's what's going to happen.
Kid Rock will do some sit down with Joe Rogan.
Yep.
Cut Target a break. All right, that may happen, and given the era we're in, you likely just prophesied. Okay, but for now, but it hasn't happened yet. So let's stay here in the now. Can we just stay here in the now?
Sure.
Isn't this what this is all we ask for on the right? Right? You don't ask for any moral standard or anything. We just, there's only really two things in the right that we want: a religious exemption. All right. We're like instead of Lot offering up his daughters, we stand outside now and look at the crowd, outside of our house there in Sodom, and we're like, can I just get I'm an actual Semite. Could I just get a How about a religious exemption? Can we get one of those? Just get a religious exemption? Possible? Right, that's our argument to everything, is a religious exemption to everything. Okay, by all means, yes, invade us, but can I get a religious exemption on that? That's our talking point, uno. And the other one is we just want market forces. Let the market decide. Well, Target agrees. That's the policy. If they looked at their stores, and if these stores want to groom kids, if the customers in these stores want the grooming of kids, then by our own standard now, all boycotts and everything of Target should end, should they not? We got Target to do what we said we wanted. We got them to acknowledge that the market listened. I mean, frankly, you ready for this? Target is being more honest than Bud Light. This is an affirmative action, pun intended. This is an affirmative action. They are saying, hey, with this Pride Month, we're going to go back and look at last month, and we'll see which of you wanted to castrate your kids and chest bind your daughters and groom the children for the drag queens to sodomize later. So they want this in these stores. They don't want them in these stores. Did the right win? Granted, what we asked for was pretty low-hanging fruit. But did we win this one? That's what we said we wanted. Market forces. The market has decided if you want to groom and molest kids, you'll get that content. Or you want to castrate the kids, you'll get that. And if you don't, you won't. This is pluralism. Why isn't this a W, guys? This is progress, is it not? Todd, do not give me a Lindsey Graham smirk. I am being sincere here. This is a win, right? This is all of our wins. Have any sex you want. Just leave the kids alone. Do whatever you want. Just don't make me pay for it. Did we not get here what we asked? Let the market decide. People don't want this. And Target says, yeah, you're right. So we're only going to give it to the people that want it. So I guess we have no moral standing to condemn them anymore for including this content because they have taken the capitalistic creed that we abide by much more than any other creeds these days, right? Isn't this what we want?
Is this part of your brokenness? Is this a new chapter of your brokenness?
I'm just asking questions. That's what we do nowadays too, right? We just ask questions. I'm just asking questions. In all seriousness, has Target not done exactly what we asked corporate America to do? Yes or no? Have they not done that?
What happens, as one of our mutual friends just reminded us here via text, what happens when Target comes back and says, as it turns out, every single store that we own actually met the sales quotas that we were looking for, so it's Pride's back on the menu, boys.
Then you know what?
Market forces.
The market has decided, Aaron. We have no higher lord, no higher law. The market has decided. This is what we want, right? Todd, is this not what we want? Is this not what most of the right has argued for on these kinds of issues our entire lives? Kill all the kids you want, just don't make me pay for it, all right? Sodomize a wrench if you want, okay? And even do it in the public square. Just leave the kids alone and don't make me pay for it, all right?
See, this
is what we want.
Well,
right?
I'm not part of that, and I don't think you are either. This is the other side of that coin where I always talk about the NCAA. Well, there's just too much money in football. This is them just saying, well, there's not enough money. So it's just ultimately, as I said, the definition of economia is not whatever banks. I don't believe that is the original Greek.
Well, for it not to be would require a different standard than that.
Well, yeah.
And a higher standard than that. And that would require a standard for us to be mutually accountable to. Everybody agrees there should be a standard we're all mutually accountable to. Where we disagree, Todd, is which standard we are willing to be mutually accountable to. And that's why many on the right love these kinds of quote-unquote market-based solutions, is because that's a standard that they're fine too with. I will let my own freak flag fly in my own life and just not subject your kids to it. See, they're willing to come up with a standard that they are willing to live by rather than one that actually is a standard.
Yeah, and this is one of the great mistakes of our adult life, Steve. It's that we all fell for it to some degree. I know I did, in terms of some kind of American cruise control. But our lodestar became Gordon Gekko. That's unsustainable. This decision by Target is still Gordon Gekko. Greed is good, and there's just not enough greed to be had here. So, we're going to put this on mothballs for a while. But if this makes money, screw the kids. I mean, there's no real plumb line here.
Correct.
At all. And they're lying about it too, but now they're just saying it's not making money. Well, even if it wasn't just we got to this gender stuff because our only plumb line for a long time amongst conservatives, even the churchgoers, was free market economics. Mm-hmm. That's not enough.
You know why we made
It's not enough.
Here's the thing. I think it's important to understand why we made those arguments in past eras. Eras before Aaron came of age. Eras that if you're a millennial like Aaron or Gen Z and you're on the right, you're like, what is this era in which you speak of a silent majority? Okay. This was the easy way out. Since in previous eras where these arguments began in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, we were still the majoritarian impulse in the culture. We didn't have to do any heavy lifting. We didn't have to confront any of this. We could just passive-aggressively take it on by saying, well, I guess we'll just see if people want to buy this stuff.
And to your original point where you started, we said, let's all just get comfortable together.
Yep.
Who's going to reject that?
Correct. And since we knew that we were doing the majority of the shopping at the Targets, it wasn't going to make money. Right? And so we could passively, aggressively take these things on without risking offending anybody, losing a job, getting shunned, being outed by in-laws I already can't stand anyway, all the stuff that we're running from now. Okay. And we got away with that for like 25 years. And we're in an era now where we can't get away with that anymore. There is a market for this kind of stuff. Remember when I told you, and the first time this really dawned on me, when I told you when Nike launched the Colin Kaepernick shoe, and everyone on the right was convinced it would fall. And I said, that thing's going to print money. And it did. Why? Because there's a whole other America out there now. We don't have the majority on what comes in and out of the till anymore. We're not in control of that. We're not the silent majority anymore. That's a talking point from 1986, from 1999. Doesn't exist anymore.
And it's our fault.
And so
believing the lies we did.
Yeah, and so now the only way out is through. The only way to take all these things on is to confront them head on anymore. There is no passive aggressive wink and nod. Am I not cute? Okay. And I found a way to do this that didn't cost me anything or break a bead of sweat or offend or make anybody walk out on me or whatsoever. Those days be gone, folks. And without revival, they ain't ever coming back. You live in a pagan country. You live in a post-Christian America. You're in a negative world now. It is more likely that Target will do exactly what Aaron prophesied 10 minutes ago. Hey, guys, we did look at all the stores. It turns out, even in Muskogee, all right, you guys want the kids to be chest-binded, so we're selling that stuff. Well, I guess we got to let them do that and not say anything because that's all we ever told them we wanted was just to let the market decide, and the market's decided, right? Remember years ago when I told you during the whole personhood, that was the proto version of abolition on the pro-life side. Remember when I told you guys years ago when I was involved in personhood? If we don't make the argument now that forces them to confront that it is a life they're killing, the window will close and they'll just openly say, we know it's a life and we don't care. We want to kill it anyway. Remember this?
Yes.
What are they now saying? That. That's what they're now saying. And so we went through this era where because these things were still passively tilted to our belief system, we could just, without having to alienate anybody, risk anything, and just show up and quietly vote at the precinct and save America again, or not show up and support these kinds of movies. Now you're just watching Hollywood bankrupt itself because it believes more in the message than it does in catering to you. We don't have this kind of leverage anymore. And actually, when we did have it was exactly when we should have confronted this stuff head on rather than passive aggressively or in search of a talking point. Well, now, though, it's the Alamo, brother. It is the Alamo. And there is no back door. Only way out is through. It feels like everything these days is so expensive because everything these days is so expensive. Food, gas, rent. What about hearing aids? What if the cost of them is actually going down? Well, that is the case if you go to our friends at MD Hearing. If you're still paying thousands of dollars for hearing aids that may or may not even work right, MD Hearing is an FDA-registered rechargeable hearing aid that costs a fraction of what typical hearing aids cost. Their Neo model costs over 90% less than clinic hearing aids, and the Neo actually fits inside your ear, so no one will even know that it's there. How do they do this? Well, MD Hearing was founded by an ENT surgeon who saw how many of his patients needed hearing aids, but could not afford them, so he made it his mission to develop a quality hearing aid that anyone could afford, and that's exactly what he's done. If you want to get the hearing you deserve with MD Hearing, go to shopmdhearing.com and use promo code STEVE to get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer. Plus, they're adding a free extra charging case. That's another $100 value just for listeners here to our show. All right. That's mdhearing.com. Use the promo code Steve and get their new $297 when you buy a pair offer. Now, how good of a deal is this? So you guys know I lost pretty much all the hearing in my right ear last July. Slowly but surely, it has begun to come back. I can now hear pretty much every sound out of it, except the one area where the buzzing still impacts is with speech recognition. So I can hear when you're talking to me. I can't always hear the words that you're saying to me if you speak into that ear, especially with ambient noise. And so I'm almost to the point where I've recovered enough hearing where I can get a hearing aid for that right ear now. And so they start at my clinic, they start quoting me these prices, $3,500, $5,000. Okay. That's a little bit different than $297 when you buy a pair offer. All right. So take advantage of that. All right. At MD Hearing, shopmdhearing.com, and with the promo code Steve at shopmdhearing.com, promo code Steve. Let's welcome our good friend Bob Vander Plaats. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
I'm very blessed. How are you doing?
I am doing very well.
You went to Sheldon, Iowa, my hometown.
I was.
I got rave reviews about you being up there, by the way.
Did you?
I did. They said the guy delivered a powerful message on the sanctity of human life and backed it up with scripture.
Well, good, because I on the way home on Saturday, I realized Amy actually realized, I think that presentation, she goes like, I've heard you give dozens of these. Uh-huh. That is the most unique pro-life presentation you've ever given, and I think there needs to be a larger audience for it. So I'm going to give a portion of it to our audience next hour.
Well, a good friend of mine who's usually pretty reserved with his praise, and he wasn't there, he said, but his wife was there, and he said his wife just said it was absolutely amazing. Oh. So congratulations.
Well, tell her the check's in the mail, and I greatly appreciate it. Thank you.
All of us Sheldon people like you.
It's funny. More people now up there are listening to me now on the Blaze.
Sure.
Because when we were local on WHO, the signal up there is very spotty.
It didn't reach very well.
So I met several people Friday night. They're like, I could never hear you on WHO. We hear you now more here on the Blaze because we can listen online. So
and probably kudos to you, Todd, and Aaron. I don't get to do this very often, but I travel the country a lot. Mm-hmm. Every place I go, I get pulled aside of saying, about the Monday segment on Deace, and tell Steve and Todd and Aaron I said hi. Just met Danny in Atlanta, who's a big fan, and several others in Atlanta as well. So you guys are having an impact.
So what's really cool is you're telling me like the 1,500 people that listen to this every day, they're really they are really intent of spreading the message of this show and finding you wherever you go.
And
right?
they're spreading out like crazy.
Yes,
that's awesome.
All right, like Johnny Appleseed. All right, let's get to it. You wanted to talk the aftermath of Mother's Day, so the floor is yours. Why?
Well, the reason I wanted to talk about Mother's Day is that, first of all, you and Amy had a special opportunity with your daughter Anna, mm-hmm. and with her daughter, your granddaughter now, and just thinking about God's design for the family. And so we complain about a lot of things today, and we point at a lot of reasons. But boy, if we'd get back to the nucleus of the family, you know how much different things would be. I told our boys early on when they were growing up in our home, we had 4 boys. But Hans, Josh, and Logan, the 3, Lucas was our child with disabilities who got us taken home. But for Hans, Josh, and Logan, said, what an unfair playing field you guys have as you enter into the job market. You've had a mom, you've had a dad. We love you. We'll always be there for you. There'll be a support for you. You don't need government to make you successful. You're going to be successful regardless. You don't carry a lot of college debt. If any college debt getting out, you have an unfair playing field. And so when you take a look at your granddaughter, help me out with her name again. Autumn.
Yep.
And Anna told me about Autumn forever. I should know Autumn. But what an unfair playing field with you, with Amy, with Anna, with her husband, Steve, and now with little Autumn. And the reason I bring that up is that we have four eyes when it comes to our ministry. And a lot of people get caught up into the elections or they get caught up into the policy. But this is what you talked about in Sheldon, inspiring the church. Inspiring the church to not be political, but to be biblical and to be culturally relevant. Well, that's what we do at the Family Leader. We inspire the church. We have a record number of pastors and churches plugged into our ministry. But then we say impact elections with ministers of God, those who want to lead policy, those who would be like a Governor Ron DeSantis or a Governor Kim Reynolds. They're out in front of us. We're not trying to push them. They're already doing it. And so we get excited about that. And then we say influence policy, which is if it's for the family, we're for it. If it's against the family, we're against it. But we're really trying to nurture and to embolden that institution of the family. But the last one is the one I want to talk about, Steve, is then ignite partnership. Ignite partnership between the church and government, not taking government funds, but to meet community needs to break bondage. And the reason I say that is that every state, every listener that is listening in right now, every state is dealing with one department's major issue and an increase in that department. That's the Department of Human Services. In Iowa alone, Kelly Garcia, our director of HHS, she said her department is $12 billion. $12 billion. And most of that is a net result of the breakdown of the family. There's not the family network there, so the government tries to step in, and the government tries to step in with doing what? By being the answer with money. We send you a check. It's not about breaking bondage. It's not about breaking people free and actually getting them on the right course. It's about giving them a check, trying to be a Band-Aid stop. Now we're up to $12 billion. If we don't answer this thing called the institution of the family, so that's why Mother's Day is, sure, we celebrate moms, but Father's Day is coming up. We want to celebrate dads as well, but we want to celebrate families and make the family cool again. Because unless you're going to get to that point, you're not going to address the fiscal issue, but you're also going to address the moral issue that's facing this country as well. And so when I saw Mother's Day afresh, and whether it be at church and the role that moms play in the nurturing of our children, but to go, we need to make moms cool again. These aren't birthing people. Is that what they call them now? Or, instead of expectant mothers, these are birthing people.
It's kind of funny. Feminism started with, we're more than, birth givers and our sex organs. And it ended with, we're just our birth organs or our sex organs and being birth givers. It came full circle.
So when you look back at Scripture, and again, what you pointed out in Sheldon a lot, God's first institution was the institution of the family. And if you get that right, you can get a whole lot of other things right. But if you get that wrong, you're going to get a whole lot of other things wrong. And I think what has happened today more than ever is that Satan has been really good about how can I destroy and destruct the institution of the family. And we're here picking up all the pieces of it. And so when we're in this battle now, whether it's red versus blue or Republican versus Democrat or right versus left, what it is spiritual warfare at the end of the day. And I think we all need to do our part to champion the institution of the family again. And that's why I think Mother's Day is so crucial to that.
As you were talking, I went to go gather some data to back up what you are saying. All right. And I'm going to share some of this data and let you kind of tee off on it.
Sure.
In 1960, 73% of children lived with two parents in their first marriage. All right. Within a little more than 50 years, that number declined to less than half of children born into that kind of family. In 1960, just 5% of all births occurred outside of marriage, just 5%. Within 40 years, that number eclipsed 40% or grew over 700% in one generation. 40 years, one generation over 700%. we have almost a third of babies born to white women are outside of marriage. Over half of babies born to Hispanic women are outside of marriage. Over 70%, so almost 3/4 of babies born to black women are born outside of marriage. And so what does that look like? What is the tangible, you mentioned privilege. There's a lot of talk about privilege these days. And the way you worded it with your own sons, it turns out statistically is exactly correct. The one true systemic privilege that exists in America left is that I grew up in a 2-parent home.
You bet.
Okay, and so these numbers just on one issue quantifies it. Okay, the percentage of white children living in poverty goes from 31% in families with only a mother to 17% in families with only a father, and all the way down to 5%.
With mom and dad.
When they're married, correct. The same percentages for black children go from 45% mother only to 36% father only to only 12% when they are both married. Okay. And what that means is that black children in 2-parent families are still 2.4 times more likely to be in poverty than white children. But we should also observe that white children raised by only a mother are 2.6 times as likely to be in poverty as black children raised by 2 parents, which again shows, the last true privilege left in our society systemically is 2-parent. If you grew up in a 2-parent family. And we could do this with mental illness. We could do this with sexually transmitted diseases. We could do this with, pick an issue. We could go back to this as a point, pun intended, genesis. But that's just one particular issue when you look at poverty, for example.
So if the family stayed intact, what I tell people all the time, you don't need to be an economist to figure out how can you make your economic life better. And part of that is stay married, mom and dad, raise your children, and you foster that with them and their children as well. So you take a look at our family, we don't need any government. I mean, we really don't need any government other than, maybe just, border security or safe internet. But otherwise, you just don't need a lot of government. And be a tax consultant. If you take a look at the growing field of human services in every state. So Iowa's a state of 3.2 million people. And you have a $12 billion budget because of the breakdown of the family. You go to Texas, if you're listening in Texas right now, that's 10 times the size of Iowa. Take that budget times 10, I guarantee you're going to get really close to what the budget is in the state of Texas. If you're in Florida, take it times 7. And that's every state across the country. And because of our model, a state like Oregon, which is not a conservative bastion, but they called our director of Health and Human Services, Kelly Garcia, and said, what is happening in Iowa? Because we need to replicate that. They're all looking for answers. The budgets are going up. The needs are outlandish. The caseloads for every caseworker is through the roof. And we're just saying, how do we get back to the institution of the family? And so the other thing I'd say is that all of our eyes have inspired the church, impact elections, influence policy, and partnership. They all lead with a small I. And the reason we highlight the small I is when you have a big I in the institution of family, there's a train wreck. When it's all about me and my marriage, it's a train wreck. When it's all about me and my parenting, it's a train wreck. Or one of the kids, it's all about me, it's a train wreck. So everything's led out of a small I. And my thing is, Steve, is we try to look for all the answers politically around. It's a pretty basic, let's get some foundational truths and get back to the institution of the family.
There's going to be a lot of people in our audience, because there's a lot of people in our culture nowadays that are like, well, I got divorced or I had a kid out of wedlock. Well, here's the thing. I was born out of wedlock. My wife and I, we met in a hookup chat room. And we're not virgins on our wedding night. We shacked up before we got married. We made a ton of the same mistakes lots of other people in these eras make. All right. My mom, got pregnant from a high school boyfriend, made a lot of the same kind of at 15, a lot of the same mistakes a lot of people in this era make. Okay. So just because that's where you started from doesn't mean that's where you have to end up. We started there, but we ended up, going on almost 30 years of marriage now, and we got to babysit our grandkid on Saturday night. And that's our hot Saturday nights now, and I wouldn't have it, Amy and I would not have it any differently, okay? So just because you started there in your family doesn't mean you can't be the change agent. You can't change the generational direction of your family. Doesn't mean that's where it has to end there. So, so this is the ideal. All right, this is not something to judge you with. It is something to inspire you by. It's the opposite of what what the enemy wants to tell you. It's just because you started there does not mean that's where you have to end up.
Very well said. You know, when we said after the Roe v. Wade, what we could use is a champion for the sanctity of human life. I really think we need a champion for the institution of the family again. Cast vision again, that family is good. And so you're right, if you're coming from a broken family or you're in a broken situation right now, understand the benefits of family. So that if it is that second marriage, it's a second marriage that's going to stick. What can you do for your children so that they don't need government services? How can we step in? Policymakers, how can we incentivize dads and moms to be involved and engage with their children versus de-incentivizing to where the dad is no longer to be found? And that's one of the biggest, there's some small policy things that we could do to say that would encourage the dad to be back inside of the home. Those are the things we need to be looking at if you want to bring down that HHS, but also engage the church at the same time. But let's embrace the institution of the family afresh.
Amen. There's a reason why in the current era, in the last century or so, the most common form of government power manifestation of the spirit of the age has been some advent of Marxism, communism, etc. And in each one of those, whether it's spoken in Mandarin or it's spoken in English or it's spoken in any other language, each one of those immediately went after deconstructing two entities, the Bible and the family, every single one of them. Why? Because that is the antidote. Those two things are the antidote to their ideology, and that's why they went after to deconstruct them.
If you deconstruct those, there's only one thing left for to be God, and that's government.
Correct.
Government's
which is exactly what
in.
Marxist regimes want.
Yep. And so therefore we have all the control. So Steve, probably my final word to these guys is cheers to moms. Happy Mother's Day, but cheers to dads as well. Stay engaged with your family. Your kids' future depends on it.
Great stuff. You guys got any thoughts on this in the last 30 seconds before we sign off?
Well, you're echoing the speech I gave. I lost my mom 3 months before I got married, and the speech at my wedding I gave about moms and what they mean and why days like this are possible. It's not just flowery language. It is alpha and omega stuff.
It really is. Yeah. Thank God for moms.
Yeah, we just had a conversation, are we ever going to be able to outpopulate or out-reproduce the left at its current rates? And I can't remember if it was on the Deace group, I think we said no. That doesn't mean that this can't also be true. Mm-hmm. Starting and raising a family is still the most important accomplishment, most important calling for 99% of those of us here and listening.
Amen.
I think that's still true.
Amen.
Good stuff.
All right, we'll come back. Hour 2 is next. Stay tuned. Back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace with Todd Erzin, Aaron McIntyre, and you. And you can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Just email us to do that. Steve@stevedeace.com, DEACE, or you can like us on Facebook and reach us there. Like us on Facebook, me, we, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on Twitter, Getter, and Instagram. You can reach out to us there as well as TikTok. And if you are a podcast listener, you can also leave us a 5-star review if you wouldn't mind. We appreciate each and every one of those. You can also hit subscribe, or if you're on iTunes, follow. That way, every time we do a new episode, it will show up in your podcast feed every single time. And this portion of the show brought to you by our friends over at Hillsdale College. The attack on excellence in America is reaching a crescendo, and it's impacting nearly every aspect of our lives. We are seeing all of our institutions either laid waste or turned against us. And if you want to get the latest news that will empower you to stand up and fight back on behalf of liberty, make sure that you get a free, no cost or obligation subscription to Hillsdale's great publication, Imprimis. You'll hear from outstanding conservative voices like Victor Davis Hanson, whom we just had on the show, Christopher Rufo, who we've had on several times before, and others. Again, it's a free subscription. It goes to over 6.5 million Americans, and that's a lot, and we're thankful for that. But if you see what's going on in the country, I think we need a lot more people to be getting access to Imprimis than 6.5 million. Amen? Maybe more like 60 million people need to be reading this. All right, so get your copy today or your subscription today at DaceForHillsdale.com. F-O-R. It's the preposition, not the number 4. DaceForHillsdale.com is where you want to go. That's DaceForHillsdale.com. Speaking of the term conservative, I've had a poll going throughout the weekend on my Twitter account that just ended, and I think this is going to end up being one of the most voted in polls we will likely have this year. And there's no backstory to it. We'll talk more about it in the overtime. It's the overtime topic today. I just thought it was interesting. I was just kind of curious what people in the audience would think. I know that's rare for me. Most of the time when I do something, Aaron and Todd will tell you, I don't do many things that are random. And a lot of times if it looks like I'm doing something random, there's like 3 or 4 reasons I might be doing it that I'm not ready to disclose yet. In this case, I just thought this might be an interesting question. Let's randomly ask. All right, so there's not an agenda behind this at all. Okay. But I was just kind of curious what responses I would get. And so on our Twitter feed over the weekend, we put up a poll. What one word best sums up your political ideology? In alphabetical order, because I saw some people say, why are they ordered this way? Well, if you look, you can see they're alphabetically listed. Christian, conservative, libertarian, or MAGA. You were really getting why they ordered this? I had people wanting to know if I was trying to make a point by how I ordered things. And again, I don't blame you for that. Because that is a very Steve Deace thing to try to layer, something inside of something. Okay, that is a very me thing to do. But in this case, I just listed them alphabetically. Okay,
you're going to be getting complaints. Why is your check mark blue on Twitter, Steve?
Yes, indeed.
That's the color they give it to you.
I don't blame people for wondering, all right, what's Deace got up his sleeve? Because most of the time I do, or at least pretend, or like to think I do anyway, have something up my sleeve. In this case, I just thought it was an interesting random question. The responses we are getting, a lot of them are really smart. Like, you guys know, I think replies and comment sections are typically where truth and sanity go to die in America, so I almost never read these things. But out of curiosity, seeing the reaction this was getting, I decided to look through some of the replies. Some of them are really interesting. I think we could do an entire evergreen episode just reacting to some of the replies that people had to this question, because they are very thought-provoking, I think. So we should maybe consider that. Anyway, we're going to go over those polling results later today. You guys don't give anything away yet, but when you saw I posed that question, what was your immediate reaction?
What sparked it in you?
So there has to be something.
But it was not alphabetical order or anything like that.
Yeah, Aaron, what about you?
It was something of the same. It seems like a good question. Sometimes I have those moments. Hey, what would people think about this? What do people think about this? I don't know what causes it necessarily as well. So I did see a lot of the comments. I agree. Maybe we should do an episode on just the replies, because I think one of the main replies, or at least some of the top replies, in unison, have a completely messed up view of the world, actually. And I'm sure they're coming from a good place, but not a fully formed place. As you can see, I'm trying not to give anything away. Maybe we'll get into this on the overtime a little bit. But I actually didn't vote because what I would describe myself was not listed, and I'll explain that.
All right. We'll get into that in the overtime today for Blaze TV subscribers. If you want to watch that today, we're going to record it right after the show and then upload it later today at blazetv.com/Deace, blazetv.com/Deace. If you're not yet a Blaze TV subscriber and you're like, I actually kind of want to watch that, then today's the day to become one. And you can do that right now by going to blazetv.com/Deace. Subscribe at a discount, blazetv.com/Deace. That way you don't miss this overtime or any of the other exclusive content that we provide throughout the course of the week here on Blaze TV. All right, before we get to our topic here, I want to remind you guys yet again, as you're thinking ahead to this fall and what to do to get your kids out from underneath the government indoctrination centers. If you are looking for an alternative, our friends at Freedom Project Academy could very well be what you are looking for. And I have firsthand experience with them. Had our own son Noah enrolled in there for a couple of years, and he thrived. and might have even finished there all the way through high school, except he took an interest in sports and some other things. So we put him over at Des Moines Christian instead to get involved in that kind of stuff. But Freedom Project Academy is built on Judeo-Christian values, classical curriculum. Students read full books, write in cursive, study the full scope of history, graduate with knowledge years above their public school peers. Why? Well, because they're not trying to teach your kids what to think, but how to think. This is an encouraging of what we used to call critical thinking, which was, basically a requirement of being an American. But they don't want you to be an American anymore. That's why they no longer require it. And in fact, don't require it, they disincentivize it. But not at Freedom Project Academy. If you want to get more information on this, you want to take advantage of the 10% discount on tuition when you enroll. You just want to maybe say, hey, I'm not there yet, but I definitely want to learn more. They've got information packets as well. freedomforschool.com is where you can go. FOR, again, the preposition, not the word, freedomforschool.com. Again, that's freedomforschool.com. Okay. On Friday, I was invited to go up to Northwest Iowa and speak for one of our most ardent pro-life, although he would probably disdain the term, pro-life state legislators by the name of Zach Deacon, who is a loyal listener to this program, and he would count himself in those that consider themselves to be abolitionists where the life issue is concerned. So he asked me to come up and keynote a fundraiser for him, and Amy and I drove up there. And you guys know kind of my MO by now. It's almost never. Less than 1% of the time I will have any notes or jot anything down. I will go find the corner stall in the men's room. So, by the way, if you're going to contact me for a speaking engagement, like, why is Deace spending 15 minutes in the men's room before he talks? This is why, okay? I go to the corner stall in the men's room because it's quiet there, and I assume people will leave me alone. Although we're entering an era where you can't count on being left alone in bathrooms anymore, amen?
Pronouns?
Indeed, yes. But for now, I'm still being left alone there. So it's a quiet place where I can get alone and just me and the Lord get prayed up, and, then we roll out. And whatever comes out of my mouth next, I kind of just don't assume is my responsibility from that time forward, So that's kind of how I've always done these things. And when it was over, I knew there were some things that needed to be addressed. I didn't know that I was going to address them the way that I did. And when it was over, my wife, Amy, she told me on the way home, she was like, I've seen you give dozens of these talks, particularly on this issue. But I've never seen anything like that and the way you laid that out. And she's like, a larger audience of people need to be exposed to that. Well, it just so happens that when I go back to work on Monday, it's going to be before, and we had a pretty packed house for a beautiful Friday night. There's a lot of other things that the people could have been doing, on a beautiful spring Friday night than coming to hear this schmuck talk. But we had a pretty packed crowd, but nowhere near the amount of people that are listening to this right now or will at some point in time. So can't promise you'll get the same level of performance, but I definitely want to lay out for you guys substantively what I shared with this audience. Because the more things change, the more they stay the same. Early June, marks 18 years ago when I made the career switch from full-time sports talk media guy to full-time news talk and political activist guy. So I've been around the block a few times. I've seen them come and they go, Hobbs. They come and they go. I've seen MAGA. I've seen Trump. I've seen Romney. I've seen McCain. I've seen establishment. I've seen swamp. I've seen Tea Party. I've seen religious right. I've seen Bushes. Okay, I've been around this block a few times. I'm old enough to remember when Michael Cohen would completely debase himself for Donald Trump. And now apparently he is willing to completely debase himself against Donald Trump. Okay. I'm old enough to remember Stormy Daniels' original story, guys. That's how long we've been doing this. Okay? And I've seen things during that 18-year lap around the track. And one of the things I've seen is that on the right, we keep having this same argument on this one particular issue over and over again. And it frankly doesn't matter what era we're in. It doesn't matter who the figurehead is. Is it George W. Bush for a couple of years? I emerged toward the end of his presidency. Is it John McCain for one campaign? Is it Mitt Romney for one campaign? Is it Donald Trump now for going on what? 9 years. It was about 9 years ago this month that he came down that escalator to announce his candidacy. So regardless of that, this one issue has generated one particular response on the right more often than any other. No one ever says, let's put off the talk of cutting taxes. That way we can win the next election and solve our other issues. You ever heard that? You ever heard that before? You ever heard that one? I've never heard that one. Have you?
No.
No, neither have I. No one ever says, let's put off discussing entrepreneurial incentives. That way we can win the election and win on the other issues, right?
Right.
We used to say things like, let's not talk about immigration, or let's do amnesty. That way we can win elections and go on to other issues. And I was one of the people at that time pushing vehemently against such a thing, by the way. All right. We used to say things like that on the right? Mm-hmm. No one says that anymore. Like no one. Even the people that think that won't even dare say it out loud. We could do this with any long-standing issue. Like right now, no one is really saying, let's put off the destruction of gender and confronting... Doug Burgum, who might be Trump's running mate, is saying, let's put off confronting tranny madness. But very few people are saying that because that issue is still hot and heavy in its infancy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that wasn't an issue. That has not been an issue for 18 years. It's been more like an issue for the last 2 or 3. All right. Think of any long-standing issue that we were still debating in the country when I came to be in this industry starting in 2006. And there's one issue where no matter who is in charge on the right, whatever movement is considered ascendant at the time, whatever figurehead is considered mob boss, godfather at the time, he or they eventually get us to a place where we are told on this one issue we have to either cave or set it aside in order to win so that we can govern and solve our other issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Why is that the case? I'm going to explain to you here in this hour that is the case precisely because it is the most important issue of them all. And that exemplifies our own spiritual deception that we have succumbed to that end. Because what I'm going to share with you as best as I can, I'm human after all, but as best as I can this hour, I am not going to share with you my opinions. I'm going to share with you data and the opinion on the issue of a being whose opinion is far more important than my own. And he's got a lot to say about this. And none of it is good, by the way. Let's start with some basic facts. I can't believe I have to do this again. I've done this many, many times, but I have to do this again. The idea that the abortion issue is costing the right elections is just simply patently not true. So before I even attempt to prick your conscience morally, and believe me, in a few minutes, I will. But before we even get there, let's just look at basic data. Since Roe versus Wade, every presidential candidate that won the Catholic vote has won the presidential election with one exception. And that was the Florida recall election of 2020, when a lot of things we had not seen happen in America in more than a century, like someone losing the popular vote but winning the Electoral College. A lot of things that were unprecedented in our modern elections occurred. And even then, Al Gore won it by the absolute slimmest of margins. Now, why is this? And Todd, you know what I'm going to say, because we've done this show together how many times. So let's just play the hits again, Sam. All right? This is because much of modern Catholic social teaching, unfortunately, has been, just as we talk on the show all the time about what prosperity gospels and other things have done to infiltrate evangelicalism, much of Catholic social teaching has been infiltrated by neo-Marxism and liberation theology. Still with me so far, Todd?
Sure.
And so therefore, outside of a couple of these unquestionably moral issues, and you see this reflected in the current Pope. When he talks about abortion and gender, he sounds like a pope. When he talks about literally every other issue on planet Earth, Todd, what does he sound like? Not like a pope.
Not like that.
Yeah, exactly. Why? Because he's a mirror of where Catholicism in the West exists largely as a whole. Very neo-woke, but on a couple of issues, holding on to its grip on orthodoxy, and life is one of them. Without a strong pro-life candidate, Republicans cannot win the Catholic vote because much of all the rest of current Catholic social teaching is much more capable of being manipulated emotionally by Democrats.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And that explains why you have to win the Catholic vote almost every time in order to win the presidential election. Prior to Roe versus Wade, in all the exit polling we've ever done, going back to Eisenhower, a Republican never won the Catholic vote. Ike was incredibly popular, didn't win the Catholic vote. So prior to Roe versus Wade, Republicans did not win the Catholic vote. They only became competitive for it because of Roe versus Wade. So therefore, what does that tell you about the primacy of abortion and the sanctity of life to Catholic social teaching, even in its current neo-quasi-woke status?
Aye.
It's still a prime directive.
Yes.
Yes. So if you run from this issue, you are risking alienating, winning what has up until this point in time been the most pivotal block. Well, Steve, I thought you said suburban voters. Everybody that's won suburban voters has won the election. That is also true. However, a lot of those suburban voters are
Catholic.
Yeah, not a lot of Catholics in Haight-Ashbury, right? Not a lot of Catholics over at Bedford-Stuyvesant. No. Where do you find a lot of Catholics? In the suburbs. Okay. So that's number one. Well, Steve, things have changed in recent elections. Look what just happened in the 22 midterms. Let's talk about the 22 midterms. You have been told that the 2022 midterms were lost because this massive influx of single women, bloodthirsty to kill their children more than ever after what happened with Dobbs, turned out in droves for Democrats. Here's the thing. That is true. But that's what you're not being told is that has always been true. That has happened in every election cycle we have had since Roe v. Wade. Single women turn out in droves. It's just a matter of the margin. They are the white evangelicals for the Democratic Party. They are their most loyal voting bloc. Go back to the conversation we just had with Bob Vander Plaats. The number one determiner of how you will vote is not race. It's not socioeconomic status. It's whether you're married. It's your marital status. The more single you are, the more likely, regardless of race, creed, or color, you are to vote Democrat. And the less single you are, the more likely you are to vote Republican. Fact. Number one determiner of how you will vote is singleness. Single women have always been this level of supporter for the Democrats every single time. That's never changed. Even in every election Republicans have won. Republicans disappointed in the 2022 midterms for two reasons. Donald Trump told you that pro-life voters didn't show up after overturning Roe. That is not true. Republicans actually won the generic congressional ballot nationwide by a little more than 2 points. They hadn't done that since 2014. You did turn out. There are two reasons why the 2022 midterms disappointed. Number one, Republicans lost independent voters again for the third consecutive election and thus have lost 3 consecutive elections. Well, Steve, the independents voted because the abortion policies were too radical. Really? Okay. Tell that to Governor DeWine in Ohio, to Governor DeSantis in Florida, Governor Reynolds in Iowa. All the governors that either passed the toughest pro-life bills or said they would, they all won. So why'd the independents vote for them? That's not why. Independents don't vote on abortion. People who vote on abortion are either very pro-abortion or very anti. Nobody votes on abortion because they kind of think about it. That's not how this works. Now, Republicans did better with independents. They lost them by only 2 points. Not coincidentally, a lot of these swing district races and state races around the country, Republicans lost. They lost them by about what? About 2 points. We lost independence again. And that's a branding problem that has nothing to do with the abortion issue. The other reason 2022 we underperformed is, again, we have no answer for the Democrats' ballot harvesting scheme. None. And I look at my home state of Michigan, where the Real Clear Politics polling average had Tudor Dixon losing by only 1 point. In any other era, if an incumbent like Gretchen Whitmer was only up by 1 point in the RCP average, and you saw what the environment was like, everyone would have assumed she's toast on election night, right?
Yeah.
She won by 10 points. She won by 10. So when you're seeing all these polls that are out today from Siena and others with Trump way ahead, those things they're trying to put you to sleep. Trump's got this. I don't have to do anything. I don't have to register people. I don't have to have my own. We don't need our own ballot harvesting scheme. We can just sit here and be complacent and convenient. And then watch Gretchen Whitmer outperform the RCP average in Michigan by 9 points. Never seen that in my life. 9. That's the final RCP average. That is what ballot harvesting looks like, folks. Except now, since we have no challenge to it, it's just called, we went from, well, they're stealing votes to their ballot harvesting. Now we're just calling it, they have a superior turnout operation, right?
Yes.
If there's anything we're good at on the right, it's being the frog in the boiling water. Just give us time. If you're on the left, give us time. Eventually, we'll accept all your talking points. With nary a challenge, maybe a meme. That's why we underperformed in 2022. Aside from the larger spiritual issues, which are what was happening in the country, there shouldn't have been a ballot harvesting operation that could have overcome that zeitgeist. But much of the country spiritually is gone. Conversely, Donald Trump would have never been president without the abortion issue. In the final debate against Hillary Clinton, Donald Trump said he would not just appoint strict constructionist justices, which was the dog whistle code word of every Republican nominee our entire lives, yes. Right? He said, he looked right in the camera and looked Hillary Clinton right in the face and said, I'm going to appoint justices that will overturn Roe v. Wade. On election night in 2016, the number 2 issue in the exit polling, judicial appointments. Donald Trump won those voters by over 20 points. In other words, if he had not taken that strong pro-life stance, he would not be president. He would not have won Catholics. The issue of judicial appointments would not have taken front and center in an entire election. Judicial appointments mattered to who voted for Trump more than immigration did, and it wasn't close. Think about that. That was Trump's signature issue that made him a force of nature, but it was judicial appointments that actually drove him to the White House in the end. A lot of it based on that solemn promise, which, by the way, to his credit, he did what? He kept it. So I want to start there by distilling this notion. There is no data to support this, which is why, by the way, they never bring you data to support this. This is not true. Have I shown in my career I am willing to say to you things that are not comforting because I think they're true? Have I demonstrated this?
Over and over again.
Yes. Have I shown that I'm really not willing to pander to you for clicks or downloads or audience share or another endorsement from an advertiser? How much more do I need to show you to demonstrate this to you? I think, are my credentials are my iconoclastic credentials secure here, Todd?
I believe so.
Therefore, if I'm telling you this, it's true. It's not a pander. Because, by the way, even if the data was against us, I'd have the same stance anyway because of what I'm about to tell you next. But because the data doesn't show this, someone needs to correct this. And by golly, I'm going to nominate myself for that job. Politically, this is wrong. It is factually wrong. It is against the data. It is the mask study of politics. It is the safe and effective of politics. It's simply not true. None of it is. So why do we keep falling for it? It is because the defining issue in every human civilization, ever, has been institutionalized child sacrifice. That is ground zero of the war between heaven and hell on this earth. And I'm going to prove it to you. It's ground zero. It is an anthropological fact of history that every human civilization has practiced some form of child sacrifice. Every single one. We don't have records of pagan honor cultures not knowing what a boy and a girl were. We don't have universal pagan cultures coining their own money and driving themselves into debt. We don't have evidence that it was just universal amongst pagan cultures that they just had no borders and built no city walls. Those are things, we're all doing those things today, right?
Yes, we are.
But these things have not been done all throughout antiquity. You know what has been done all throughout antiquity and until now? The killing of our own children. Why? Because it is the ultimate sign of demonic influence in a culture. It is the ultimate middle finger, one finger salute that Lucifer can give to God. The ultimate one. And he's been doing it from the very beginning. The first itemization of sin in this world after Adam and Eve fall is a murder. God comes to Cain and says, careful, sin is crouching at your door. Doesn't say it's overcome him yet, has it? What is the evidence that the sin has overcome him? What does he do, Todd? He murders his brother. That is the next itemization of sin in this world, in the scriptures, after Adam and Eve are expelled east of Eden. And that is not a coincidence. There are 7 things the Lord hates, 6 that are detestable to him. One of the first ones mentioned are what? Hands that shed innocent blood. This is the defining issue in any age. It is not, let us set this issue aside and we will fix everything else. Instead it is, because of this issue, everything else is broken. And when we come back here in the next segment, I'm going to walk you through Jewish history to also make my case. You see it both in the revelation God gives to Moses to his people, and then you see also what happens, what incurs the worst wrath of God. What form of apostasy incurs the worst wrath of God in all of the scriptures upon his own covenant people? Why? Because this is the number one moral issue in God's economy: life. It is the starting point, the origin point from which all other revelation, God-given rights, laws of nature and nature's God emanate. As Ronald Reagan once said, if you don't have the right to life, all your other rights are kind of a moot point from that point on. It is because we don't know and protect life that we are broken everywhere else. It's the other way around. And I'm going to use the Word of God now. Now that I used their own political data, I'm going to use the Word of God to confirm this when we return. So, folks, I think it's been pretty well demonstrated that as much as possible, we need to have independence, autonomy, control over our own healthcare. It's not completely possible. A lot of us, we couldn't operate on ourselves if we wanted to. We're just not qualified to do certain things, and there's just no way to completely exempt yourself from the system. But there are ways, though, that you can at least immunize yourself as much as possible. And one of those key ways is with our friends at Jace Medical. Get the Jace case now. Get a backup of the next batch of venerable antibiotics and medications. They may decide after giving them Nobel Prizes that they're dangerous and should be taken off the market and no longer prescribed right when you might need them the most. And you can also now expand your Jace case with customizable options to make sure now that you have the medications that you're taking backed up, or even more importantly, perhaps a loved one that is on Medicaid or Medicare. And so they're a complete ward of the state where their healthcare is concerned. And you want to make sure they're prepped so that the rug doesn't get pulled out from underneath them. Jace Medical can help you with all that. Yes, you can get ivermectin for your Jace case, get EpiPens, because guys, we are coming up to bee season. So Might need to get some EpiPens in my next Jace case. All right. So if you want to check them out and take advantage of an outstanding company that wants to give you the self-assurance and the confidence and the peace of mind that you need for this era, go to JaceMedical.com. JASE, that's how it is spelled. JASE for JaceMedical.com. Use the promo code DACE at checkout for the discount. Promo code DACE at checkout for the discount at JaceMedical.com. So, again, everything that you're being told on the abortion issue is 180 degrees wrong from both sides, everywhere. The amount of bad information here, fake news here, the amount of fallacies here that just go against what actual data demonstrates. That doesn't mean, by the way, that we're in a completely winnable great place on the issue. Did I say that? No. That doesn't mean that Americans are just lining up to vote for legislation that says we should put women in prison who commit abortions, even if we do think they're sociopaths. That dog's probably not ready to hunt quite yet. Okay. No. All right. So I'm not here to sell a Pollyanna message that that the American people just put a referendum on every state and we win them all. What I am here to tell you, though, is many of the rationales that you are being given are not true and fly in the face of actual events and the data that we have. Why? Because as I said to you last segment, this issue is ground zero morally in the war on this planet between heaven and hell. And it's why it has been fought in every single culture, in every single era. Because it is the ultimate sign of being given over. It is the ultimate sign you have taken the enemy's monkey paw and bear hugged it. Is to begin killing your own offspring. Of the few things that set us apart from the angels, the ability to procreate, they don't have that. The ability to create things in our image, just like God created us. It is one of, if not the most tangible examples, proving we are an imago Dei, unique in all of creation. So therefore, if you are on the side that is against all of those things fundamentally, what would be your prime directive to exploit, to poison, to desecrate? That. And we see this in the scriptures. Like I said a minute ago, the first itemization of sin we see in the Bible after Adam and Eve are expelled is when Cain commits murder against his brother Abel. Moses goes up to Mount Sinai, receives from 2 stone tablets handwritten by God himself, the 10 Commandments. The first tablet, Commandments 1 through 5, are the vertical covenant, us between God. The second tablet is a horizontal one. Because God is God, here's now how we will live amongst ourselves and treat each other. When Jesus says in the New Testament, the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, and mind, that is summarized in the first 5 commandments. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. Don't make other gods. There's only one God. That's a summary of that first table, or that first tablet. And then he says the second one is just like it. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. Those second 5 commands on the second tablet Moses has are the itemization of what Jesus meant by that. And he would know, because the God Moses went to meet with was Jesus. The number one way to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, the second greatest commandment, what's the number one thing it tells us not to do to demonstrate that we love our neighbors or love ourselves? The number one moral commandment is what? Do not commit murder. It's number one. Todd, did God just raffle off these 10? And just to randomly cast lots, and these were the 10 that came up, and in this order, they're in no uncertain order whatsoever.
He did not.
He did not. You know how we know that? Because later, God will reveal more laws to the Jewish people in Leviticus. And there will be, because God's economy rests on what's called restitutional judgment or justice. That's what eye for an eye means. It doesn't mean vengeance. It means what you've taken from someone else, you must be taken from you. That's restitutional justice. Like when you were a kid and you blew out Granny's window across the street, old man Emma's window, what did your daddy make you do? Pay to put the window back, to restore it. Restitutional justice. Now it's a crime against society. That's not biblical. I wasn't murdered by Ted Bundy. His victims were. So, certain things that we do to violate those second 5 receive different penalties than the other. Which one received capital punishment most often? Can you guess?
Murder. Which would seem to indicate, if God attached the most severe punishments to it, murder and blasphemy, by the way, were the 2 that received the most capital punishment. So blasphemy being an example of violating the first tablet, right? Just desecrating the name of God, the presence of God, blaspheming the Holy Spirit. That's the vertical covenant. But the horizontal one between us, loving our neighbors who love ourselves, the number one way to get executed, violating any of those, was to murder somebody. Doesn't take, how much common sense does it take to conclude that the crimes that had the harshest penalties were the ones that God had the harshest regard for? Cause and effect, correct? Yes.
And you see this demonstrated later. One of the things Moses tells the people in his farewell address is he warns them not to do what the pagans do. Do not go down into the valley and throw your babies into the fire. He warns them of this. Unfortunately, about 1,000 years later after he gives this warning, they will do exactly that. I want to read from you. This is from the prophet Jeremiah. This is chapter 7, beginning verse 30. These are the words of God. These are the words of God, not of Jeremiah. The people of Judah have done evil in my eyes, declares the Lord. They have set up their detestable idols in the house that bears my name and have defiled it. They have built the high places of Topeth in the valley of Ben Hinnom to burn their sons and daughters in the fire, something I did not command, nor did it enter my mind. Now let me stop. What does Topeth mean? Topeth was the name of the altar that you built to Molech. That was the name of the altar. Its literal translation is desolate place. Horrible place. Hell is one of its translations. In other words, this altar is hell on earth, is what God is saying. This altar, where they went into the valley and they sacrificed their children, is hell on earth. And it won't be the first time he'll say something like this, by the way. I'll explain in a minute, but let's continue. So beware, the days are coming, declares the Lord, when people will no longer call it Topeth or the valley of Ben Hinnom, but the valley of slaughter. For they will bury the dead in Topeth until there is no more room. Then the carcasses of this people will become food for the birds and the wild animals, and there will be no one to frighten them away. I will bring an end to the sounds of joy and gladness and to the voices of bride and bridegroom in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem, for the land has become desolate. That is harsh. And what? Think of all the apostasies God put up with. And there would be, I guess we'll call them corporal punishments, temporary disbandments, temporary diasporas, temporary captivities, okay? What led to the final eviction from the land? This here. Why? Because this issue is ground zero in the battle on this planet between heaven and hell, and always has been. This was the final straw. And this will be fulfilled by Nebuchadnezzar. What he did to the Israelites, the siege of his city, people drank their urine, ate their filth to survive. He then, after he finally subdued the city after a long siege, he brought the king of Judah out, who did not listen to Jeremiah, who did not lead a repentance, but more rebellion. He brought that king of Judah out, along with all of his consorts, his concubines, his wives, and his sons. He murdered them all right in front of him, and then he plucked his eyes out, so that would be the last thing that he'd ever see. And then he took him off to Babylon for captivity. But ultimately, it wasn't Nebuchadnezzar doing that. It was God. God makes it very clear. He is rising up Nebuchadnezzar to be the buckle of his belt when daddy takes it off. Why? Because of what you did. You erected an altar for hell on earth. That's what Topeth means. You erected that altar. You took your children there. You placed them on the hands of Molech, which were so aflame that the children would voluntarily often roll over into the furnace to their own death just because the staging area was so hot. And you beat those drums loudly so you didn't have to hear, like you don't have to hear on the telehealth abortion when someone kills their kid on Zoom and you're okay with it. And you don't have to hear over the darkened brick and mortar walls of the Planned Parenthoods that are in your neighborhoods. No different. And for that, God says, that is enough. And the harshest judgment God gives to his people in the Old Testament ensues because of this. Years later, when Christ returns or comes on the scene, and the Jews have returned now and been allowed to be reestablished in the Holy Land, Jesus preaches on hell more than any other topic in the New Testament. That's your hippie Jesus, by the way. The word Jesus most often uses to describe hell in the New Testament is a word called Gehenna. Now, why did he use this word? Well, because this land is forsaken, just as the prophet Jeremiah said, the valley of slaughter. When the Jews return, this becomes like the trash heap of Jerusalem. There's nothing settled there. Their refuse, their trash, the dead animals, their rot, their filth, their excrement would all get piled there in the valley of Ben Hinnom, the valley of slaughter, and lit on fire to get rid of it. And the fires of Gehenna never stopped. They burned night and day. A raging inferno of filth burning constantly. And Jesus says, and by the way, that place was called Gehenna. And Jesus says, that's what hell is like. The fires never stop. The torment never ends. The filth is on fire constantly. It's a desolate place like Topeth. The hell on earth you tried to create is but a facsimile of the real thing. God hates unequal weights and measures. He says that in his word, right?
Yes.
Was Nebuchadnezzar sent to the Jews to desecrate the temple, have the Ark of the Covenant lost to history, the walls of Jerusalem destroyed over unequal weights and measures?
No.
He was not. God hates when we're cruel to the poor, right?
Yes.
That's also not why Nebuchadnezzar was sent. The temple was destroyed, the ark was lost, Jerusalem was desecrated, and the Jews dispersed because of this. Exactly what we are doing now. So it is not, we'll stop printing money and that'll fix things. Wrong. You're printing money and have no regard for equal weights and measures because you have no regard for life. The first moral commandment on the tablet. It's not, we'll stop having drug dealers come over the border to OD our kids and human traffickers to kidnap them and sell them to pornographers. But we got to put the abortion issue aside so we can say, no, you're allowing those things because you don't care about life. In its most innocent stage. So why the hell do you care about some snotty 13-year-old girl that probably would mouth off to you? Just another human trafficked kid. We have it backwards. All these other things are Romans 1 level judgments because we are a given over society because we have enacted and erected valleys of slaughters. We have topeths in almost every neighborhood in America. We have it backwards. And you can give me all the strategies you want, you're wrong. You can give me all the talking points you want, You're wrong. You can give me all the nuances you want. You're wrong. Cosmically so. And all the evidence is there, statistically, to God's word. Because we get this wrong, everything else is going wrong. It's backwards. This is the ground zero moral issue in all of creation in the battle between heaven and hell. This one. And it always has been. And it always will be. And that's why there is the most deception and self-loathing surrounding it. Gentlemen, we have 30 seconds left. Your thoughts?
Well, the people of Sheldon are lucky that you came up on a Friday, because this is, as I said, regarding Mother's Day, this is alpha and omega stuff. We have managed to convince ourselves that 2 + 2 can be something other than 4. Steve just gave you, it was harsh, it's intense, but it is remedial math.
There were signs. There have been signs for a long time. These questions were, we can't define a woman. We can't define monetary policy. We can't define what a border is. We can't do this. The undefinition of words. The sign, the main sign, was always there. What is a life? That is the question. Depending on how you answer that question, we've been answering it wrong a lot as a country. That's how you get all of that other stuff.
Romans 8:28.